Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beer Pad. This week, we are looking at our favorite Star Wars games, those games that made us feel all full of the good stuff of the Force. And then we're going to mention some of the ones that made our lightsabers go limp and feel a little jar. Joining me, as always, is my colleague, my co-host, my cohort, Raymond Padilla.
And thank you, Marcus Beer, the captain of this ship, the excellent Welshman, the best Welshman I've met in my lifetime. And we have a special guest with us today. Who's with us today, Marcus?
Well, we're really blessed today. I mean, we're recording this on a Sunday, and God has reached down from on high this Sunday to deliver us the legend in his own lunchtime, the sex god of the apocalypse of the greater Los Angeles area, the man, the legend. It is Paul Semel. Hello, Paul.
When you called him a sex god, I was thinking of Tom Jones singing "Sex God." Isn't he Welsh also as well?
Tom is Sex Bomb.
I know it's Sex Bomb, but you said sex.
And yes, it is. It is. Sir Thomas of Jones is indeed. He is indeed a Welshman. Excellent. All the sexiest Welshmen are. I mean, Richard Burton, Michael Sheen, Tom Jones, me. There you go.
Richard Burton. He's my King Arthur for sure.
Johan Griffith. Mr. Fantastic himself.
That's how you say his name? I had no idea. I was like,
Johan.
Yeah, I look at it and I'm like, no, I'm not going to try.
Johan Griffith. Isn't he lovely?
Is that like a Welsh John kind of thing?
Possibly. I don't know. Way cooler than John.
Yes.
Apologies to Johns. But I mean, let's face it, when your name becomes a slang terminology for a customer of a lady of the night, it's right up there with Karen, isn't it? So,
and let me ask you something about Paul. We're going to talk about him as if he's not here and can't listen. Doesn't he look like the comedian Tom Segura?
Oh God!
I swear you could be a stunt double on his next tour.
Actually, I think he could. I mean, thankfully, he keeps his shirt on.
No, that's the other one.
Is that Bert
Kreischer? Yes.
Who's just done a movie with Mark Hamill, yeah?
He was? Really?
Yes, he's in a movie. He's just done a movie, I think, with Mark Hamill where they get high and kill people.
What? It's amazing.
Google it. It's hit in this past week or so.
Is that what Cocaine Bear is about? I thought
No. Cocaine Bear is about the story of a really good party in West Hollywood on a Friday night.
So we are talking about Star Wars games today. We have a list. We've checked it twice. We're going to tell you who's naughty or nice. Talking about Star Wars games that we love, some that we did not, some honorable mentions, and some dishonorable mentions. Let us
all the dishonorables, I tell you.
The deplorables.
Oh, yes.
Why don't we take the time machine and kick things off by going back to, I believe it was 1983.
Yes.
Let's go back in the way back.
So the Star Wars arcade game, I think that's a favorite of all of ours. Paul, I will defer to you because you are my senior.
Right.
So
yeah. That was the very first ever Star Wars game. It was only in arcades. It came out, I guess it probably came out around the time of Return of the Jedi, like that summer. And it was very, very simple. It was like these simple line drawings, and it was
all vector graphics, my friend.
Thank you. That's the word. And it was all just attack on the Death Star. Like you fly in, you're fighting TIE fighters, just in a very straight, linear kind of way. And then
take out the cannons.
Yeah, then you're flying across the surface of the Death Star, and then you do the trench run, and then, of course, you blow it up, and then it starts all over again. There's nothing from any of the other movies. You don't blow up the second Death Star by going in it or anything. And, when you were 15, as I was, even though at that point I had played a ton of arcade games, Asteroids and Missile Command, that one I remember blowing me away because I think it was if not the first, it was certainly one of the first where it was not like a flat screen, where you're moving up and down left to right. It was like you were going in like it was 3D, so to speak.
I think they also
Yeah,
they
so
also
you really
had
feel like there was motion involved.
it wasn't just a standard arcade cabinet too. You climbed inside it.
Yeah, there were versions that you would go and like sit in, and you had
Yeah.
the controller looked like something
Yeah.
that would be in an X-wing, and
That was my first experience of it in an arcade in Swansea when I was, I don't know, a little 12, 13, just to sit inside that. That's the cool thing. And the audio from the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a first as well. So yeah, sorry, Ray, your turn.
No, see what I loved about it is even though it was simple vector graphics at the time, I had never seen anything like it. But it also did a good job of approximating what their computers looked like in the movie. So you were seeing kind of like what they were seeing on the little computers in the X-wing, in terms of the trenches, what the cannons, how everything looked. So it was perfectly pulled from the movie. I do have a memory of this. My babysitter took me to the arcade, and I really wanted to play the game. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and the attendant was like, "This might be a little hard for you. Do you want to go play pole position?" And then I didn't say this, but I'm like, "Fuck you! I'm playing Star Wars." It's like, I got your pole position right here, man. Like, yeah.
I can just imagine 8-year-old Ray saying, "Yeah, you can suck my pole position, bitch."
Was I even 8 then? No, I wasn't. So you had this in the arcades in Wales as well?
Don't look so surprised.
No, obviously.
We had electricity there as well. It was fantastic. When I saw Star Wars on the big screen in the same decade it was released, we were very proud. Yes, we had a lot of arcades, and there was one in Swansea. Mostly arcades were things you'd find at the seaside. When we go to the beach on vacation, so the equivalent of, I don't know, Santa Monica Pier on this coast, or the Jersey
Shore,
the Jersey Shore. But I mean, every seaside town in the UK, and considering it's quite a small little island at the end of the day, there's a fuckload of seaside towns. And the Brits have this thing of like, oh my God, it's above 5 degrees. Put some shorts and a t-shirt on. Let's go to the beach. So yes, there was arcades everywhere. And, for the longest time, we'd have Pac-Man, Pong, Space Invaders, Galaga, and that was, variants thereof. And then penny slots, where you drop a penny in, and then these things would just, drop down, and you try to win more pennies. It was all fixed. Gambling at an early age there, people. That's what we did in the UK. But no, when that one came out, I mean, there was always a line. The machine was never empty, and you'd have to take your your 10 pence piece, and you'd have to put it in line next to the others, and that's it. You won and done. So no continues. You go to the back of the line, and it was a hard game. I mean, it really was a hard game, even though you could set. I mean, and this was a great thing I remember about it. You could go hard, easy, or medium, and even going easy, it was a bitch. But for that sort of like 3-4 minutes, I was Luke Skywalker. And as somebody who was 12, 13 years of age, who watched all 3 movies and was an absolute fanatic for Star Wars, it was just it was absolutely the best thing. And I remember obviously that we then did get other versions. We got Return of the Jedi, which had the biker.
Right.
The Scout chase
on the moon,
and the second Death Star. Can't remember what it was in Empire. But
it
there
Hoth?
was literally, it was Hoth. There you go. That was right, Hoth. So there was the Star Wars trilogy one where arcade in the same kind of cabinet, and you'd pick which one you wanted, and that was always cool as well. But I think just as fan wish fulfillment, they cannot be topped. I mean, they're not great, and compared to X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, for example.
Sure,
but when X-Wing 1983, but when X-Wing versus TIE Fighter then came out, and we were playing this on PC, the nostalgia we were getting was not just Star Wars nostalgia; it was nostalgia for the arcade game because, our little PC sound systems with our tiny little speakers were blasting out Star Wars, and we had our joysticks or our combat yokes or whatever if you're a really hardcore sim person. And, that's when you were doing these battles, X-Wing TIE Fighter. And that was, I think, one paved the way for the other. And the nostalgia for that first game for, I think, this generation of Gen Xers is something that can never really be topped.
Now, it's interesting that you brought up some of the other games that you played in arcades, like, your Galagas and your Pac-Mans, which I loved all those games. But this was the first video game that really gave me a sense of immersion. It really, part of it was the sit-down style cabinet. The upright cabinet didn't have the same feeling because it was open air.
Right. But didn't have the speakers behind you.
Yeah. So being inside like a cockpit, the graphics, which were like the computer, the music, as you said, this is the first video game that really took me to the other place. Like you said, you felt like Luke Skywalker when you were playing that game. And that's something I didn't get from, as much as I loved, Galaga and Pac-Man and Q*bert. I didn't imagine myself being in the game. And this was the first game that did. I hate using the word immersive because it wasn't a word before the video game industry beat Merriam-Webster into submission. But it had a sense of immersion. It immersed me.
And
Paul,
it did pave the way for a lot of similar. I mean, you did mention pole position, but then we had likes of Enduro Racer, which was the motorbike game where you started sitting on the motorbikes, and then you'd have more cabinets based on driving games. Outrun, where you climbed into the car. I mean, this game kind of paved the way for all of those other games to really up the ante. To I mean, obviously arcades are still going to a certain degree, around the world, and you do see some really, really cool stuff that's kind of mind-blowing, but it all comes back to that it was Atari, wasn't it? It was the Atari arcade machine, or was it Bally?
I don't remember. Let's see what the
we're googling. As you can see, folks,
yes.
We prepare on this show. This is what old people do. We just go, it was made by so and so, wasn't it? Oh well, the young people couldn't look it up and correct it.
Your first statement was correct. It was an Atari cabinet. Nice.
Hey, not as senile as I look. Paul, don't say anything. So yes, I think that and that one was as good as the next game on the list was as disappointing for me. Bit of controversy here. Dun. Let's go, because Raymond, you have to defend to me Rogue Squadron.
I love Rogue Squadron. I mean,
why? Tell me, why is it on this list? I could see why the original arcade game. It was the first. It was an absolute genre-defining. It was a piece of arcade history.
Yes.
Best movie tie-in. Did everything it needed to do. Rogue Squadron. First of all, what format were you playing it on?
I go to N64 in my head.
You didn't play it on the 32X? What?
No, I did.
Or the Sega CD. Sorry, it was on the Sega CD. My apologies.
I do not think I had that one.
It was the disc drive for the Sega CD when Nightcap was on it, and
yeah.
Paul's looking confused here. Am I wrong? Are you going to correct me? Correct me. Come on.
I don't remember. I just remember playing it on Nintendo. And loving it in the same. It's funny because I was going to bring it up when you were talking about TIE Fighter because it was very much the next sort of level of that of its where you were flying in a TIE Fighter, in an X-Wing, and you would always do the same. All of them, of course, had the same battles. You would do the Hoth battle, you would do the trench run and whatnot. It's funny because when I was thinking about this video we're going to do, it struck me that I can't remember the last time we fought Hoth or the trench run. I can't think of it's at least 10, 15 years. So, but I'm with Raymond on the Rogue Squadron games. Not all of them were great and not all of the parts of them were great, but like when you would do the Hoth battle in those, it was so much fun. Going into their
apology. My apologies. It was Rebel Assault on the Sega CD. That's the one I'm getting it mixed up with. Rebel Assault on the Sega CD, which was an on-rail shooter CD game. And I apologize, I got it wrong. Doesn't happen very often, I have to say, because I'm normally right. Or otherwise I make up my own world. But yes, I got it wrong. I apologize.
Why I liked it is it goes back to that sense of immersion that I was talking about with the arcade game. I got that all over again on Hoth on the N64 game. This game brought me back to that Hoth scene in Empire Strikes Back. And again, it pulled me into that world, brought me into that game. And I just absolutely love it. Did you get the same feeling, Paul?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you really felt, when you would do like a hard dive, you felt like you were making, you were doing a hard dive. It very much had the same spirit of the other games that we were talking about, which they've carried over. I mean, I think it was I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, they did like another sort of space battle game and where you're a pilot. Like that's always been a big thing with Star Wars. And they've usually, not always, usually done a good job. I mean, there was even around the time of the prequels, there was a Starfighter one that gave you the same kind of vibe.
Oh, right, for the Naboo with that.
The Naboo stuff.
The Naboo Starfighter. I mean, it wasn't as good, but it was, it was still a lot of. Those games are always really fun, When they keep it simple, when they start to like try to get realistic with it, then they start to lose me.
If you want to check your inboxes, I just sent you a YouTube link to the Sega CD game. Rebel Assault.
Should emphasis on the ASS?
I mean, it was released on Windows, Sega CD, and the 3DO.
Oh wow!
We can talk about the 3DO another time because I helped launch the 3DO in the UK back in the day when I was a PR scumbag. That's how old I am, people. All right, so Rogue Squadron. Because I got it confused, I'm going to make an admission here. I've never played Rogue Squadron. First of all, I never played. I mean, I had the N64 for a little while, and then I got really bored with it and sold it. Yeah, really just wasn't the greatest console for me. I know that's heresy for a lot of people, but I mean, I was coming out of the Super Nintendo era where that was like my favorite console, the Super NES. And the N64 hit, and it just kind of left me cold. It really did.
I would like to take us on our first tangent, please. Question for you, gentlemen: who was your favorite X-wing pilot? Not counting Luke, like the minor guys.
Porkins.
Yes.
Best fucking name ever.
Yes.
Plus, I mean, look, he's right up there with Fat Thor. I mean, at the end of the day, I am fully behind any character in popular culture that I could actually, have a chance of cosplaying as. And there's two. There's Fat Thor and there's Porkins, and that's it. There's never been a chubby Doctor Who. There's never been a Fat Master. Yeah, and that's really, I think, I mean, everybody says, oh, what about Wedge? What about Biggs? Porkins, forever.
Wedge I can see. Biggs I don't think was around long enough.
Wedge is the name of a fucking salad. Put some blue cheese on him and some bacon bits, and that's it. He's a salad. Or he's used to open a door.
I love that the writers just called the fat guy Porkins. It's like, cover me, Porkins, and put down that KFC, goddammit.
I honestly wish they'd gone the whole 9 yards. It's just like, all right, I'm going in, fat boy, cover me.
What I wonder is if Patty Jenkins does do her Rogue Squadron movie, will Porkins be in it?
No, don't say Patty Jenkins and anything that's interesting in popular culture. That's not good. That director is not good. Wonder Woman 1984. No. Curdles everything. No Patty Jenkins. No.
So I'm going to find this and add it later. But so around the time of Solo came out, some fans made this poster of a Porkins prequel starring Jonah Hill. And the poster looked fantastic.
But this is old. This is super bad Jonah Hill, not buff,
No,
chill, surfer
Yeah.
dude, and very happy in his life. Good, more power to him, Jonah Hill.
Yes.
So yes, absolutely. And look, we are not anybody who says that we are fat shaming. Fuck you. I am the heaviest.
None of us are in shape.
Well, no, I am 6'2" and 270 pounds, and it's not muscle. It is fat because I'm on drugs that make me fat. And I also like chocolate. So there you go. You combine those things, and you get fat beer.
So
which
fat beer. That's the opposite of light beer. Of the fat beer.
And boom, here I am. Waddle.
I will defend you to the high heavens, but you have the 2 C's, cancer and chocolate. So,
and you know what? Both are going to kill me, but one's going to make me happy.
What's killing you, Paul?
Pasta.
Paul's the healthy one amongst us.
Yeah, I know. You're the healthiest of the 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't
sad commentary on your lives,
look,
I'm the healthy one.
If you don't drink, you don't drink to excess. Don't smoke.
I do?
Exactly. See what a bit of adamant there. But at the end of the day, this is what you look like. He's 23.
I would have went the opposite direction and said, like, Paul's 79. He looks fantastic.
He's 112.
Yes.
He's Dorian Gray. There is a picture of him somewhere.
It's in the Sony office.
All right. So let's talk about. So I'm going to throw this out to you: Rogue Squadron or OG arcade game? Which would you prefer? Which would you say has had more of an impact on you two? It's obvious for me because I didn't play the
It's the arcade game because I never at the time I was already when Rogue Squadron came out. I had already been working as a video game writer. So I had experience with other really cool games. When the arcade game came out, I was still a kid and I had never seen anything like that before in my life. And I didn't know video games could be like that. So totally blew me away.
Without the original arcade game, I guess they would have eventually come up with Rogue Squadron, but maybe not. You can definitely see the lineage from that to TIE Fighter to
absolutely. So no question for me, arcade game.
Okay. All right. So the next one on the list. And I'm going to, Paul, do you want to queue up the next one?
I don't know what.
The next one I don't think you played, Paul.
Oh, you didn't play it? So, all right. In that case.
There's 2 on the list that I didn't play, one of which is an MMO.
Yes.
All right. So, Ray, do you want to queue up the next one then?
Yeah. So the next one, as Paul alluded to, is an MMO, Star Wars: The Old Republic. And at the time, I thought it was one of the most ambitious things I had ever seen. We already had big MMOs at that point, like EverQuest and WoW, but those are all worlds that those creators built. So in some ways, it didn't have the pressure of the Old Republic because Star Wars has been a revered property for people like us for decades at that point. And it's so hard, no matter what you do with Star Wars, you're going to piss some people off because Star Wars means different things to different people. So there's no way to keep everyone happy, but I was amazed at how well this game did at bringing MMO style gameplay and integrating the Star Wars universe into it. And it was a fantastic experience. Maybe, I still think WoW is the best MMO ever. I think you agree with me on that, Marcus. I'm not, I want to say 98% sure, but I was really impressed that they did something so ambitious and got so many things right. And of course, some people were not happy with it, but they pissed off as few people as possible, which for a Star Wars thing, I think that's amazing.
All right. So I have so much love for the Old Republic. Obviously, it was BioWare. Unfortunately, it was EA BioWare. So, the gaming lord taketh and the game lord flip you off. when it came out, I had actually pre-ordered the collector's edition that came with a huge Darth Vader figure that I still have, the Darth Vader statue. It's actually in one of my storage boxes because obviously, as you can see, I'm kind of strapped for space with all the other Star Wars crap I have dotted around here. It's lucky you can't actually see behind the camera because I've got a whole wall of Star Wars art. I've got like 2, 3, 7 pieces of Star Wars art just sitting behind this wall. It was crippled, as you know, as EA was wont to do in the early to mid teens when they were releasing games that needed this always-on connection. I mean, obviously, an MMO does need it to a certain degree. Well, actually, it does need it. No ifs, ands, or buts. But if you remember the SimCity 4 debacle, everybody remember that one? The Old Republic had the same problem. They woefully undercalculated the amount of people who were going to be on the servers night one. Even though mine had arrived and I installed the disc and I knew there was, this was when discs were a thing on PC games, and I had a brand new Alienware machine ready to run this top of the range. I was so excited for this, and the first night I couldn't get in. Much like everybody else, the launch window came. Everybody had like a 3 gig update, which back in the day was really, really crazy because none of us had great internet back then. Paul still doesn't, but sorry, you knew that was coming, mate. But yes, the huge updates were just absolute soul killers. So, I went to bed and blah, 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 let it run overnight. But then the next day I got into it. And it is incredibly fun. I mean, the game is still running. I was playing it every sort of like 4 or 5 years. I'll get back in, reactivate my characters, and all my legendary stuff will still be sitting there from the collector's edition. The game, they've dropped so many enhancements. They've dropped in space combat. The missions are really quite linear. It's not to the degree of X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. I mean, what we imagined was a multiplayer Knights of the Old Republic with X-Wing versus TIE Fighter mashed together. We didn't get that. I mean, let's face it, the technology wasn't quite there to do that anyway. But you've got to think that if somebody buys the No Man's Sky engine, reskins it, and just lets people go fucking bananas, that's going to be a license to print some money. But you could play dark side, you could play light side. You had humans, you had human robot, android, cyborg, amalgams, lots of different characters, and it had the nuance. It had all the nuances that we expected of a BioWare game. We had the good, the median, and the evil responses. Your character, there was literally a bar, or there is literally a bar that just shows if you're going into the red, you're going to the dark side. Blue is the light side. And obviously, me being me, what did I do? I fired up the dark side right away.
Of course.
Went off to the Sith training world. Absolutely had a blast. Everybody was a Jedi. And basically, they'd learned from the mistakes from Star Wars Galaxies. Do you remember that one, Star Wars Galaxies? Sony Online, who decided to say, oh, we've done this with EverQuest. Now we're going to do this with Star Wars Galaxies. And basically, it's a game where only 1.05% of you will ever get to be a Jedi. But you can run a bar on Tatooine.
The dream.
Yeah, I mean, that was right up there with the Matrix Online as an absolute freaking disaster in a way not to do it, but not to do an MMO. But I think they learned a lot from EverQuest. They did, not EverQuest, World of Warcraft. They didn't make a full-on copy and a reskin, which was smart, but the game is excellent. Production values are great. I mean, now it's not a resource hog now. You can run it on pretty much any machine. They still have some seasonal content drops. I don't think there's any more expansions coming. I would love to see a sequel because I think the world is ready for something like that, providing you offer it as games as a service and you don't do this subscription based. Really could be quite excellent. It's one of the games that it's a comfort game for me, right up there with World of Warcraft. if I'm feeling blue, I know I can download and reinstall the client in a matter of minutes, and then it'll have a quick upload, and I'll reset my password and go through everything and log back in. And I'm just, it's so easy to go to different planets, and Hoth is there, and Tatooine is there, and Coruscant is there. And, the missions, they are kind of samey. And once you get outside of your first sort of like the first 20 levels and you've passed your training, whether it be dark side, light side, smuggler, whatever, once you get off your home worlds, you're into the same missions over and over. Things diversify a little towards the end game as you start to branch out again. But even for just starting brand new characters over and over and just going through all the different variations that you can do, I think I've probably got about 8 characters on the go. Last time I checked. And
what's your favorite build?
Oh, Sith Inquisitor.
Oh.
Human Sith Inquisitor. It's just something really cool about it. It's just so satisfying. The seasonal stuff is fun. They have a faux Christmas thing and a faux sort of like summer solstice event as well. That gives you lots of cool little shit, like little droids to follow you around, or upgrades for you. So you get a new speeder bike or a different skin for your speeder bike, because that's a great way to travel around as well. It was so good. It got a lot of grief for the connection issues and for it not being what everybody really wanted it to be. But I think that that was not going to be feasible at that time, and it had been delayed a few times as well. But if you play it now, it's really, really enjoyable. It's not innovative by any stretch of the imagination. Now it's not going to, appease those who, feel that, well, this doesn't appeal to me. I'd rather play What Remains of Edith Finch. And more power to you. Enjoy Edith Finch. This is just an old school MMO that you can actually play for free now. If you want to go on and drop a sub, you get a lot more options, but you can play for free, much like Warcraft. So, love it.
Now, let us take a trip in the time machine once again, not going back as far. This time we're going back to 1995, the early days of first-person shooters. And there was a Star Wars first-person shooter called Dark Forces.
Oh.
Now, for some context, I believe when the first-person shooter craze really started, 1992 was Wolfenstein, 93 was Doom. So this came out 2 years after Doom. Now, Paul, do you remember the first time you played Dark Forces, and what did you think of it?
I want to say that I played it on a PC in summer camp, but I may be wrong about that.
What were you doing in summer camp in your mid-20s? Paul, is this something you want to share with the audience?
Wait, you said 93 or 80?
95 for Dark Forces.
Yeah,
90. Oh no, then it was not summer camp. Then no.
Thank God for that.
No, that would have been junior year of high school. Okay. So then I would have been playing on an Atari computer, like the 480 or one of those. Do you remember those?
No.
On PC. I think it only just dropped on PC.
I played on PC.
CD-ROM game.
Yeah, I know that, but I definitely played it, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that it was the first Star Wars game that wasn't based directly on like one of the movies. I think it was the first Star Wars game, at least that I remember, where they created an original story, an original character, but then again, it was also a first-person shooter, but it was a really good first-person shooter. And
right,
I remember, it probably seems quaint now, but compared to what they were doing with Castle Wolfenstein and Doom back then, there was things where you would look up and shoot a guy up there, and
that was the first. That was the first. That was the first thing you could actually do. That was amazing. Just to have that verticality and opening up this whole new area was so cool. first time I saw it being played was at the EMAP offices. EMAP used to be a huge publishing giant in the UK, and I was a freelance journalist at the time. And somebody, a journalist I know called David Upchurch, was reviewing it for one of the computer mags. And I just sat there next to him for hours watching him play this game. Because, again, much like with the arcade machine, and you have the audio, hearing those blasters reverberate, the blaster fire, and the chatter from the stormtroopers, holy shit. That was, again, that was something we still weren't used to because, in 95, I mean, the PlayStation had only just, PlayStation 3DO, I think the disc-based machines had only just started their hype to release.
Mm-hmm.
We were still kind of based on cartridge games at the time, which didn't have that capability really.
Yeah.
And to see this with the PC graphics that were really quite, top of the range, it was just mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing. Now, while I love Dark Forces 2 is my all-time favorite because that's Jedi Knight.
Right.
And that is you're still the same character, Kal Katarn, but you are fucking Jedi. First person, and this was nothing. There was nothing like this out there. You had the verticality, you had the jumping, you had everything, but now you had your force
powers, yeah,
and your fucking lightsaber.
See, I maintain that this game would have been hilarious if instead of Kyle Katarn, you were playing as Chris Kattan. That different game.
Nobody knew who he was outside of the UK, outside of the US, my friend.
Nobody knows who he is now.
He still performs. He still does stand-up.
Available for $5.99, by the way, on Steam.
So I'm going to say the same thing again. One of the reasons I love this game, same as the arcade game, and same as Rogue Squadron. I had played shooters before. I remember in college, playing Doom in my friend Will's room because he had the best PC. And I loved it. There was nothing like it at the time, but it wasn't a story that I connected with because Doom wasn't really about story at the time. Not a whole lot going on. But when you had introduced Star Wars, you introduced a new character, Kyle Katarn, not Chris Kattan, which I still think is hilarious. It just brought me into that world once again. And I think that's the magic of these Star Wars games. They take existing things like a vector graphics game, like a rail shooter, like a first person shooter. By introducing Star Wars and doing such a good job of adding the Star Wars trappings, the music, the sound, the look of the stormtrooper armor, it just brings you into that world and gives you that sense of immersion, not immersive.
You also
when it's done right.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's because we're going to talk about a couple things that
that are not done right. Yeah,
they're literally that and bad.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that let's face it, this was LucasArts at its freaking peak when LucasArts was doing Monkey Island, Full Throttle.
Yeah.
So when they released Dark Forces 2, not only do you have the Jedi powers, you could pop into third person, and that was a first for a first person again. That was really cool. I remember running around popping to third person and just watching myself waving the lightsaber around. And I could do that for hours. In fact, I think the compilation of Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2 and the expansion packs are games that I have probably bought several copies of over my life because it's like, oh, I lost the CD on this one. I'll just buy another one. It was much like remember when Warcraft and Diablo had the chest, the Diablo chest compilation game.
Oh yeah.
That you'd see in Best Buy and Sam Goody and Circuit City for $9.99. It's Diablo 2, all the expansions, blah blah blah. And same with Warcraft and Starcraft. The Game of the Year editions that we all see now,
right.
Even if your game hasn't been anywhere near a Game of the Year award. it's just, I mean, it was just, again, pure nostalgia, because at the end of the day, when these two came out, the prequels were thankfully 2 years away. And so we hadn't been stained by the Phantom Menace. We still had a love and nostalgia for Star Wars at the time that George hadn't pooped on from a very great height. But yeah, this was this along with X-Wing and TIE Fighter, the 90s was a really good time to play Star Wars games. It really was.
Guys, you know something? I hate sand. It's rough and it's coarse and it gets everywhere. Acting. #acting. Now, before we get to our number one game of Star Wars games we love, let's talk about some of the honorable mentions that did not make the list. Paul, you're really into the Star Wars pinball stuff. I'd love to hear more about that.
I've always loved, I love pinball anyway, and I love the old Star Wars arcade pinball games. I also really love the new tables that the Zen Studios make for Pinball FX, Zen Pinball, whatever it's all kinds of weird names and stuff like that. And they've done some really, really good pinball games over the years for, the new movies and the old movies, and ones that are about specific characters and ones that are about just the movies. And they don't give you the same immersion as you get from playing a first-person shooter or a piloting game, but right. But they are really fun. And the cool thing is that Lucas, back in the day when they were making the first one, he was adamant that it not just be like some other pinball game with Star Wars stuff on it. He wanted it to be a really good pinball machine, and he wanted it to take advantage of the pinball-y stuff that you could get out of Star Wars. And that's always carried through with all those pinball games, whether, no matter who's making them.
What are some of your favorite features like that are Star Wars specific that you didn't necessarily see in other pinball machines?
I mean, the Zen pinball stuff, like they always do these things where you could never actually do them in a real pinball machine, because you'd have it's like the whole thing on Doctor Who about the thing being bigger on the inside and the outside. So they would do things like have like different layers where like you would, if you did certain things, like all of a sudden now you're in the bottom part and like you're hitting stormtroopers with the bulb, and you got to hit 15 stormtroopers before time runs out, and
right,
and things like that. And they would do things like the Return of the Jedi table is all set on Endor, or the fourth moon of Endor. I always get that confused. And they would have like the AT-AT move, and suddenly it's blocking a different part, like it do different things, and again, they don't always get the actors, but they always get the right sound effects. So it's like you're hearing like the lightsabers and the things like that. And so like Darth Vader will come out like and grab the ball, and like it's like, whoa, okay. You don't see that in a real arcade pinball machine. So that's what I like about those. That's another thing I like about those Zen games.
And you don't want Darth Vader grabbing your balls.
No.
Very bad.
No.
Is it with the Force or with his actual
Force crush?
With a loving touch. It's with the respect and dignity you'd expect of a guy who has a pair of balls himself and knows what it would be like if they were squeezed. How
do you know? What if they got burned off in the lava? You don't
sure
know.
They give him a big shiny bear.
He has cybernetic balls.
And suddenly it turns into a robot chicken sketch.
Everything does. Now, Marcus, you brought up Super Star Wars for your honorable mention list. Hey, very nice.
Super Star Wars, which was also followed by Super Empire Strikes Back. They also had Super Return of the Jedi. Now, 1992, I think these were released in the US, 1993 in Europe. Basically, they copied the game. It's platform, shoot them up, jump to platforms, shoot things. It was fun. Again, you'd hear the John Williams theme come out. I know they actually released this on the PS4, and they redid it a couple of years ago, so it's available on, I think, on the Nintendo platforms and the Sony platforms. Now, this game was hard. This game was not for the faint of heart, and I was working at a video game store at the time. And we get this in, and we literally, we're just taking in turns to play. And it starts off with the Jawa Sandcrawler, and it's just so hard to time everything. It's so brutally unforgiving. I mean, people think Elden Ring is hard. You know what? Go back and play this on the old unresponsive Super NES pads, and then come back and talk to me. But it was great. It was, cartoony, but it was bright, vibrant, great sound effects. You'd hear, the Jawas going, "Odini!" and
Yes,
the blasts, and you'd shoot things, and then Empire Strikes Back came out, and again hit all the same beats of the first game. Only they decided to ramp up the difficulty because that's what you're supposed to do. And then when Super Return of the Jedi came out, can you see where I'm going on this one? That is the hardest of the bunch. Absolutely insane. Again, hit all the same beats, platformer, bouncing around, shooting, lightsabers. But it's just a really, really cool game. But you've got to have the patience of an absolute frigging saint to play this. Now, I haven't played the newer ports, so I don't know if they've made them a little bit easier, or they've made some concessions. But that's I think the only thing that stopped Super Star Wars making my top 5 list, or our top 5 list, is the fact it was just way too fucking hard. But it's really enjoyable for what it was on a 16-bit machine back in the early to mid 90s.
See, my issue with it now, not at the time, is if I'm playing a game called Super Star Wars, the whole time in my head I'm thinking, "I'm super. Thanks for asking."
Okay, Big Gay Al.
So,
all right. Leave the comedy to Paul, all right?
Hey, he is the Tom Segura lookalike. So he is.
Are you going to say Tom Selleck lookalike then?
That's about as appropriate.
So now we're going to talk about the top game on our list of Star Wars games that we loved. And this is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Now, this game is really special to me, obviously as a Star Wars fan, but BioWare is also my favorite game developer of all time. Still have my BioWare hat. And this was pre-EA BioWare, so I loved everything about this company at that time. Starting with, they hooked me with Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, which I loved those Infinity Engine games. And I'm an RPG guy. I think more than either of you right now. I know, Marcus, you played a lot of RPGs back in the day.
I still play a lot of RPGs. I think the difference is you tend to focus more, bless you, within the JRPG milieu, and I actually play original games.
And they are original games, but I will not get into that.
I tease. Look, there's enough room for everybody to enjoy the games that they enjoy.
Sure. But for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, I just love that it had the BioWare style gameplay that I loved about the company's previous RPGs. Had all the Star Wars trappings, but it takes place like thousands of years before A New Hope, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? 4,000 years.
Yeah.
So there were a ton of Jedi at the time, good and bad. And I loved how you learned more about the lore of the Jedi, different types of Jedi. You had ones and both good and bad. And I love how it expanded on force powers and teaching you which force powers were more light side, which ones were dark side. Although I'm sure you can figure out that shooting lightning out of your fingertips, probably not a good guy move.
Shooting it out of your ass, great party trick.
What actually came first? Was it the game or the comics? I don't remember.
I think it was the game.
I thought it was the game, yeah.
I think it was the game before the Yeah, I think it was the first time I'd seen anything with regards to going into that sort of like the old Republic
Right.
mythology, because it wasn't sexy. It wasn't sexy until this game came out. And the beauty of, for example, the Old Republic, the MMO I talked about earlier, is that it's technically KOTOR 3, because you do have touchbacks to Darth Revan. In
Right.
the Old Republic, there are missions where you interact with the cult of Revan. And this was, I remember playing this on Xbox, the old Xbox, the very first Xbox. Not Xbox One, but the first Xbox. Microsoft really need to get their naming conventions together. And the beauty of this was that, yes, you could play it as you could with any BioWare game. You could drive it down the road and be perfectly balanced. You could be super good and annoying, or you could be a dick, which was always fantastic. But the story was great. The combat, even it was turn-based, but it still really worked. There was a great loot system. There's a great upgrade system. I mean, just going out there, just exploring Tatooine and finding a crate dragon to fight. And if you manage to fight it with your two companions, and you manage to beat it, there was a great crate pearl waiting for you that you could drop into your lightsaber to go way. The companions.
Oh my God.
The robot.
HK-47.
HK-47.
So
hello, meat bags.
Yes.
I mean, that was probably the first time we had a really outstanding companion in video games that was fully articulated. I mean, they were all fully articulated. No, but HK-47 was above and beyond, because he just didn't give a shit. And I mean, the actor playing HK just took it and ran rampant. Because the other thing is, up until then, all we've been used to in the Star Wars environment was fucking 3CPO. 3C3PO. There, put my teeth back in. Oh. But I mean, that's all we've been used to, really, the protocol droid. Whereas
so
HK was funny.
Were you saying specifically to Star Wars then?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, he was so fully fresh, but I also think he was one of the best companions in any video game that we've had. I mean, it's just hysterical. His disdain for humanity or organics in general was brilliant. The missions were great. Now, I will throw a spanner in the works, as I am one to do, in that while the first game was excellent across the board, great story, worked gameplay, blah, 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 there was a KOTOR 2. And that KOTOR 2 had a way better story than KOTOR 1, but was crippled by an engine that was just so past its prime. It was a buggy disaster. It was basically Obsidian who did the second game.
Yes.
And they took everything that was good about the original game, made it better, but they were let down by this horrible, horrible buggy engine that just wasn't worth anything. And it sucks, because at the end of the day, this became, for a while, this became Obsidian's MO, if you will. They worked on Fallout New Vegas, the best of the Fallout games, with a shitty engine that was buggy as hell. Now the Fallout New Vegas is patched to the nth degree, and you could buy the Game of the Year edition, or you can play it on Xbox Games Pass. But you can buy it for like $10, $5 with all the expansion packs thrown in. It is a superlative example of a Fallout RPG, and Knights of the Old Republic 2, in my opinion, needs that patch, because if that had been the case, it would have been a legendary game we would still be talking about nowadays. The first game, absolutely excellent. BioWare knew what they were doing, and they nailed every single thing. The second game, if that engine had been just half up to scratch and not a buggy mess, Obsidian would have just wiped the floor with the original.
Weren't they doing I thought they were going to do a remake of the first one, like Like not like a. I know they put out like a version of it, but I mean, I thought they were going to do like a whole new version of it with like updated all this other stuff, kind of, like they did with Dead Space and Resident Evil too.
Yes.
They did.
I mean, they put out like an authentic version, like that. Those people that put out like the sort of like vintage versions of like.
What do you mean, those people?
What do you mean, those people?
All right, so the KOTOR remake is coming from Aspire Games.
Yeah, those guys.
It was supposed to be out by now, and I think it's there is a more sort of like spit and polish remake that is actually out, I think, on the Switch. But 2025 is what they're saying on the fully zhuzhed version. Okay. But what you can do is, I think you can get it on Good Old Games for like $3.
Right.
I mean, the problem, hell, you can get it on the App Store from Apple. It's pay on your iPad, and it plays really quite well there as well. The problem is the resolutions on the old versions do not work very well on a fancy computer nowadays. But still, it's a shining example of BioWare, I think, at its peak, before they really sort of like imploded. I mean, that's what, and I also think that's why the Old Republic works really well. I think that's, again, part of the backlash against the Old Republic was that it wasn't nice, the Old Republic Part 3.
Right. So, Paul, before we get to your KOTOR thoughts, I just want to respectfully disagree with Marcus that I think the first one is better. At that time, I think this was peak BioWare. And at that time, I don't think this was peak Obsidian yet. And Fergus, I think he's the CEO. He's the founder of Obsidian. He used to joke at the time that Obsidian were the bio janitors. So they were kind of like, they would do the sequels to BioWare games. Like they did Icewind Dale, I believe, while BioWare did Baldur's Gate. So they shared a lot of the same technology, and they joked about being BioWare's cleanup crew. So I don't think they found their New Vegas stride yet, but this game was, I think, instrumental. KOTOR 2 was instrumental to them getting there. Just the writing for me. I
would say the writing is I would say the writing's stronger on the Sith Lords, and I'm looking at it now, and it is available on. Let's see. I think it's available on the App Store. Let's see. Yeah, it's $9.99 on the App Store right now, which is really interesting. I wonder if it's patched and running, because I mean that might be worth a really good thing. The great thing was, though, that it also carried over your saves.
Yes,
which for a console game at the time, it wasn't on PC. We know this, but it was something that was primarily on Xbox. That's what a lot of the big push was, and for a console game to carry out over your saves and your character, that was a big deal. But I think they're both shining, outstanding pieces of gaming history. I mean, you look at that entire list. Rogue Squadron, for me, is the one. Obviously, I got confused. I haven't played. I don't have any dog in that particular fight. But arcade game, The Old Republic, Dark Forces, KOTOR, you could look at that entire sort of like sequence of games with their sequels, and they are all really outstanding pieces of video game history within the Star Wars universe.
Paul, are you a big of a KOTOR nerd as we are?
No, I don't like turn-based combat. And
that's right. I remember
we sort of find really uninteresting, except for in the South Park game. For some reason, there it worked for me. I don't know why.
Again, South Park. Who did the first South Park game?
Right.
Obsidian.
Right, but this was years.
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, look, and Stick of Truth, I actually prefer over the Fractured Butthole. I think the writing is better, and I think the combat they nailed it. And I'm not a big fan of turn-based either. I mean, if I was into turn-based, turn-based combat, I'd be playing JRPGs with Ray. But for these games, there's a select few where the turn-based just works. Another one where it works is Midnight Suns. that works for me. I know that's Marvel, but it does work for me, that turn-based. It feels organic. It doesn't feel like too much of a bore. There's enough going on. There's enough with my planning to keep me going. And that's what I said. That's why I will say that KOTOR had that. South Park had that. And interestingly, the Old Republic didn't have that. Oh, actually, no, it didn't. It was more of a button mash, to be honest with you. And it works for it because you couldn't really do turn-based in the online space. But fine with me.
Now we're going to go to the dark side, but I just want to throw this out there. Chris, I think you did a great job of writing KOTOR 2. I just like Drew's writing a little bit better than yours. Just being honest. Still think you're both great writers.
Both outstanding writers. I just think KOTOR 2 edges it. We'll agree to disagree.
Yes.
That's what we do here.
Now,
wanker.
Let us talk about some Star Wars games that we did not love.
How long have we got left?
Well, we want to stay generally positive, so we won't be doing 5 games like we did for the stuff we loved. Why don't we start with Star Wars Kinect? Because I'm dying to get the annoyed gamery take on this.
All right, so technically it's Kinect Star Wars.
Yes.
I was corrected on that verbiage by somebody from Microsoft before I went and reviewed this on NBC LA back in the day. And this is one of the few games. And let's face it, I was going on NBC to tell people about, the good stuff in video games, point them in the right direction, age appropriate, blah, blah, blah. It was very rare I slagged off a game. But I actually took that game, I went on and I said, this is a game you must avoid at all costs. If you like Star Wars, stay away. If you like video games, stay away. And then I literally tossed it across the studio because it is just an awful, awful, awful game and part of Microsoft's misguided Kinect bollocks.
Yeah.
That plagued all of us in the games industry. Thank God they're not trying it now because everybody in this on this show would probably fracture a hip. No. But it was stupid, just dancey type crap. It was just awful. I mean, it's so bad that my brain has actually annexed off so much of it. I had friends come over to watch me playing it when I got the review copy, and they were like, "This is shit." I'm like,
right.
No shit, it's shit. So that is far and away the worst use of a Star Wars license. And I know there's a lot of other ones. And I know you're gonna talk about one more, but I'm gonna throw another one in there.
Yeah.
That came out on the first Xbox, and that's Obi-Wan.
Oh.
Star Wars Obi-Wank, as I like to call it, because it was a horrible, horrible, horrible game that besmirched the memory of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and shame on whoever made that one. Sorry.
Shame.
Ding, ding, ding. Shame. Look, I know people don't go out to make bad games, and bad games do happen.
Right.
But at the end of the day, neither that or Star Wars Kinect should never.
I want to say something about Star Wars Kinect, or whatever the hell it's called. I think the idea of a dancing game with Kinect makes perfect sense. I think
that's why we had Just Dance. Just Dance worked.
Right.
I have video of my wife dancing drunkenly a decade ago with some friends to Just Dance, whichever version when they sent that one out. And it's hysterical and it's funny and we all have a blast.
Yeah.
But doing the Han Solo in the cantina
dancing game is a bad idea.
Bad idea.
No matter how good you could have made that, it just doesn't make any sense.
You could have done so much more with it. You could have had a proper lightsaber battle. You could have had proper controls. Work it with your control pad to do recreate the original arcade game or Battle of Wampa or whatever. There was so much you could have done without the gimmicky crap.
Right. Well, I mean,
I did enjoy the part where you got to be a Rancor, though, because that very much tapped into my fantasy of being Godzilla.
That's your fantasy?
My dreams are small. And yeah, so like that part of the game for like, the 20 minutes I played or however long I played, however long it took to beat, that was fun. But that was literally the only thing that was fun about anything on Kinect, to be honest with you.
Right. So Marcus
You know what
used the word misguided to talk about Kinect, and that's
Yeah.
really the perfect word for it. Because there was some cool technology there, but the way they tried to use it just was not great ideas or great execution. It was just
Well, it was always like a stopgap on the way to VR. That's the thing. You always knew that VR was going to come and supplant this.
right, but it also seemed reactionary towards the Wii's success
Yeah.
of use of
Yeah.
motion. So
Yeah.
it just seemed like, hey, we can do this too. And I'm like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And Beat Saber showed how VR can make lightsaber battles
Right.
cool.
Beat Saber's fantastic.
Yeah.
But yes,
Still don't know about the
Microsoft has
name.
2 duff Star Wars games there.
Yeah.
All right, what's the other one on the list?
This one is a PlayStation game called Masters of Teräs Käsi.
I remember this one. Was this by the Tekken team or something? Was this by Namco
it's a fighting game where the background is there is a force specific martial art, and it made no sense. They introduced a new character. They brought in a character from the books, Mara Jade. So that was pretty cool. That was a cool character. But in terms of its quality as a fighting game, it was not very good. It was pretty.
Yeah.
It was a Tekken knockoff. I mean, a lot of reskins, but it was interesting that you'd have in Tekken games. I think it was Tekken, but moving forward, you'd have the Star Wars characters. You'd have like Yoda and Vader appear as Soul Calibur. My apologies.
Soul Calibur had Yoda, Darth Vader, and the guy they called Star Killer from The Force Unleashed.
Right, there you go. So you did have that, but yeah, it was. I mean, in Britain, slang term for a toilet is Käsi. So it's like, I'm off to Käsi. I'm going to take a shit. So when you're looking at Teräs Käsi, it really, just summed this shitty toilet of a game right up. It just wasn't fun. I mean, the moves were, they weren't inspiring. You really didn't get a sense of achievement if you pulled off one of the moves.
Right.
It was button mashing in the extreme.
But some of it just didn't make sense. Like one character is fighting with a lightsaber and one is fighting hand to hand. Like, who's going to win this fight?
Yeah.
Yes, the one who's not got their hands at the end of the thing. But again, there was no. But that's the thing. There was no decapitations. There was no dismemberment. It's like these people. You were fighting with a lightsaber, and you were hitting these people, and it's like, aha! Look at this. Right. I'm so strong. Your lightsabers just bounce off me.
It's kind of the opposite of the dancing game, which was just a bad idea for Star Wars. This is a good idea for a Star Wars game done badly. I mean, you could do like a really cool, like if you limited it to people who use lightsabers and did like a Soul Calibur.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Like you could even I have this idea. You set it like 100 years from now. It's a new Jedi Order, and you're like, okay, hey, little Padawan, you're gonna fight all these different famous Jedis, and like
the
you're
trials,
Darth Vader, here's Anakin, here's Yoda. You're fighting Darth Maul, you're fighting all these other people. Like you could do like a really cool kind of Soul Calibur fighting game, and this game just didn't work. Although I do love that they brought it up in solo, though. That was hilarious.
Anybody who is listening now in video games development and decides they want to pitch this to LucasArts, this pitch is actually the property of the Beer Pad and Paul Semel. So
me, I have an idea. I know how.
And we all get, and basically it's 30%. That's our fee, 30% off the top at the end of the day.
And if you can get Mark Hamill to be in it, I know you can even set it right before The Force Awakens.
And I would prefer an attaché full of cash versus a check. Thanks, LucasArts.
I prefer an AT-AT full of cash. I'd like an AT-AT, actually.
An AT-AT
that would be great.
I just want a T-shirt.
So you said Käsi is slang for toilet?
Yeah, Käsi.
So it's Teräs Käsi. this game.
Yes, it's what's known as after you've had a good curry.
That must have gone over real well when Solo came out. So
ouchie. Now we have one more dishonorable mention before we wrap things up. Star Wars Demolition. I think this is one of Paul's choices.
Well, this is like the dancing game. Like, let's take the worst idea for a Star Wars game, because it was basically, if you remember, Twisted Metal.
Yeah.
Which was like basically a demolition derby with weapons. It was Star Wars Twisted Metal. And so it was like, why? Yeah, exactly. It was like, who thought
this was around the same time as Teräs, Käsi, wasn't it?
It was around that I think it was like,
it went through this phase of, these PlayStation games, these are the ones that were successful. Soul Calibur, Tekken, just was it the Wipeout and the Destruction Derby game and Twisted Metal, and what can we skin them, with?
Right.
And this is where it got crazy. There's this period in the sort of like late 90s.
Sometimes it worked. I mean, the Star Wars pod racing games were actually a lot of fun.
Right, but that was a thing that you saw in the movie and you wanted to do.
It would make sense.
Like I never imagined like, hey, let's have a demolition derby with a HEST or whatever.
Right.
It's like,
that'd be a short demolition derby.
So Teräs Käsi is 1997, Star Wars Demolition is 2000. So it's that end period.
Yeah.
Star Wars Demolition is actually downloadable on PS4 and PS5 if you hate yourself and you want to play.
No.
Well, there was also wasn't there Super Bombad Racing?
Yes,
that's right.
A racing game with Jar Jar.
Yeah, that one was a great idea. I think that was a Nintendo one, wasn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah. But I mean, as with most things, Jar Jar, you don't.
There was actually a Force Awakens game that was a PC CD-ROM game that was available, and I know this because I was still living in the UK when the Force Awakens came out. I was working at Blue Byte, and we were over for E3. The Force Awakens was opening, and as a treat, our CEO had bought out the theater for all the staff to go and see the Force Awakens. And we were so excited to see a Star Wars film. It's like, oh wow, great, blah blah blah. And we cheered, we sat there, we cheered, and this, that, and the other. And it was like 3 hours after we'd left the theater, we thought, this is kind of shit. But what I did find, and I think I sold it off and left it in the UK. I found a PC CD-ROM game that basically recreated all the hit, like the core bits from the Phantom Menace. And I've not seen it anywhere since. And it was just mediocre. But again, it was just one of those ones that seemed like a good idea, but wasn't.
Yeah.
And just reinforced how bad that particular movie was. And look, we haven't even touched on the Lego games. Because at the end of the day, the Star Wars Lego games, if you look at the New Hope ones in particular, which is the OG trilogy, those Lego games are absolutely fantastic. They filled a void. They were I know the prequel ones came out first, but they weren't as good. The Traveler's Tales, really hit their stride with that Star Wars original trilogy of New Hope, Empire, and Jedi, and they were so much fun, and they still are. And now, obviously, we are 9 movies down the rabbit hole, and yes, there you go. But we've got Mando, and we've got this new the Skywalker saga, which was dropped on, and that is just like an immense. You could actually just buy a console, give somebody that one game, and it could keep them going for 100 years. It's so freaking huge. It's overwhelmingly huge in a lot of ways, because it's got the stage now where they've got so many things where it's like, once you unlock this power, skill, whatever, you can go all the way back to the beginning and replay. and it's put me off the Lego games to a certain degree. But when that one came out, the original trilogy, I was so blown away by it. I loved every single moment of it. And then it just became so repetitious that we'd see every single pop culture IP with
Harry
Indiana
Potter.
Jones, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Harry Potter one was pretty good. Indiana Jones was scraping the barrel. Lord of the Rings, not so great. The DC stuff and the Marvel stuff. The DC villains one was kind of cool. The first Marvel one, Lego Marvel Superheroes, was kind of cool. And look, I will not besmirch them, because at the end of the day, I'm going to show you something so cool.
Marcus, were they all Traveler's Tales games? Okay. Shout out to Traveler's Tales, by the way. They are Manchester adjacent, and I visited their office once. They were very kind to me.
Oh, they're wonderful, wonderful people. I got this.
Lego
this thing
Hulk.
weighs a ton.
Don't drop it.
No, I'm not going to. I'm going to put this somewhere safe.
So you know that scene in Spider-Man where he drops the Lego Death Star?
Yeah.
They actually had 3 built so they can do multiple takes of that.
Well, that Hulk is one of only 4 available.
Wow.
They built 4, 1 to go to each major territory. And the one in the US got sent to me, and I got told that if I managed to get it on the TV when I was at NBC, I could keep it. And I did. I was reviewing the game, brought the thing in, put it right between me and the anchor.
Nice.
And now, I mean, it's so heavy, but it's all glued together. It's a beautiful Hulk.
Did it come to you assembled?
It came pre-assembled. Oh,
okay.
Yes. Thank you. Otherwise, I'd still be building it. But I mean, it's these sort of things. I'm sure you and Paul actually have these, and this might be a show for us in the future where we actually talk about some of the cool shit we've gotten from video games over the years.
Oh yeah, we could do that for sure.
Right
now we're doing lightsabers now. Uh-oh. I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Now let's see how you handle it.
VFX saber
what
for
a
the win, my
shot.
friend.
A video with 3 guys talking about their dicks.
That'll
for
up
the
that'll up the subscriptions. Now, guys, of course, we want to hear all about the Star Wars games that you loved and the Star Wars games that you didn't love. So,
look, I've got stormtroopers on roller skates.
hey. So please leave us a comment on the video wherever you may be watching it. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like, give us a subscription. If we get enough subscriptions, Paul will come back and do a topless performance.
No, he won't.
Or he won't do it if you subscribe. One of the, whichever is the preference.
Most random bit of merchandising. Mandalorian tea.
Does it
I
have?
thought that was a Mandalorian Novena candle. I was like, okay.
It was it was a Mandalorian oolong tea, and they also had a Grogu one, which is a chai tea.
I wouldn't have guessed chai for Grogu, but interesting. I thought I would have went with a green tea.
I think it was a green chai tea.
Or
maybe that's racist. I don't know. You being racist? You profiling?
No. Very close to going on a rant, but I will not.
Go on a rant, Ray. Rant.
No, we're at 90 minutes already. We're gonna move on to the next one. Guys,
in next week for the rant.
Our social media is all down here. Please like and
under
subscribe.
Paul's chin. Where did Paul go?
Blocking your face so people can go to your website. PaulSemel.com, outstanding website where he talks about video games, books, music, does some incredible interviews with some really cool authors.
And his loves of goat cheese.
Yes. And we will see you next time on the Beer Pad. Thank you so much for watching. Paul, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you for the invite.
Until next time. Take care, guys.
Boy.